Hey folks, so I thought I'd go over the assignment again. That's going to be due on Thursday. It's going to be due about 11:59 p.m. So we're going to talk a little bit about the logistics of rhetorical criticism, considerations, things to include the rubric, and we've already done part one, so we won't go over that again. So as I mentioned previously, this needs to be at least 3 written pages. Students who have turned in less than 3 written pages often don't get the in-depth analysis that I'm really looking for. It's going to be worth 100 points. I expect it to be in Times New Roman 12-point font. And there's no references or cover page necessary. That being said, if you're referring to information that you got from outside, you got from the internet, you wanted to look up how the ad was received, this is all acceptable. But then you do need to have references. So rhetoric is a study of how writers and speakers use words to influence an audience. You break what you're looking at into parts and explain how all of these parts work together to create a certain effect. We encode and decode these messages every day. And we may ask ourselves, hey, was this good? Is this message a good message? Is it a bad message? Or could it be both? Was it effective or was it ineffective? Did it achieve its intended outcome? And how should the reader, the viewer, respond to the message? So we use rhetorical approaches as a way of systematically investigating and explaining symbolic acts and artifacts for the purpose of understanding rhetorical process. And that's Faust from 2006. So we see a lot of ways that we encode and we decode messages. And we're going to go over this a little bit when we start talking about visual rhetoric in the next area. So as I went over before, there's a lot of different rhetorical criticisms that you can use. There's Aristotle and the modes of persuasion. There's generic. There's feminist. But some things I really want you to focus in on. And you don't need to talk about all of these things, but I want you to think about power. I want you to think about the gender. What's going on with the gender? What's going on with the races? Think about the sexes. Think about where it is. What's the message? Who is the audience in the advertisement, in the message? Are we part of the story? Are we complicit in it? Are we voyeurs that don't really exist? We're looking in on a scene. I want you to think about all these things. So a couple considerations. Don't just say add, because I'm going to lose my mind going and become all boring. There's 34 people in this class. Please don't make me read add 15,000 times per essay. Think about different synonyms you can use. Ad, artifact, photo, advertisement. Again, this cannot be a moving advertisement. Every semester somebody decides to make this a moving advertisement, and that's not going to be appropriate in this case because it's going to include too much for you to analyze. You're not going to be able to get in depth enough in 3 to 5 pages. It could be advertising, it could be a public service announcement, a commercial advertisement, a political message, or a product. I'm wonderful with all of those things, but it still has to be still. Again, I'm not going to want something that's purely descriptive. I want to see that analysis. I want you to make conclusions. I want to hear your thoughts on it. If you say this is sexist, well, how is it sexist? Tell me what you think. Your opinion should be included, and it should connect back to some of the theories that we've talked about. We've talked about social judgment theory, we've talked about elaboration likelihood model, we've talked about the narrative paradigm, but most of us in this class also know about Aristotle's modes of persuasion. That is a totally appropriate way to analyze your advertisement. Think about the logos, the logic, the hard numbers. Think about the ethos, the character. Was it Jennifer Aniston who's trying to sell you smart water, or what's going on there? And think about that pathos, that emotion, that fear, that lust that they try to get across. Things to include. Explain the advertisement. What's going on in it? You don't have to get so in depth in the introduction. It can be very generic. There's two women on the screen trying to sell you jeans. Think about who produced it. Is this from the 1950s, the 1980s, from the 2000s? Give me a better idea. And if you happen to have a specific year, tell me that. And then give me that brief description. What I'm really going to want in the analysis is that bulk of the paper. I'm going to want you to include descriptions when necessary, but really focus on how the parts work together to create the advertisement's message. Mention theories that could explain it. Talk about the nonverbals of the actors. This is so subtle but so important. When we go back to that Burger King ad, the 7-incher, what her face was doing was so important in the way that we analyze that ad. I really want you to think about the nuances of the ad. Things to include also is going to be a conclusion. I'm going to want a brief conclusion. I want to hear your overall thoughts and judgments about the artifact. Did you think it persuaded you? Did it have the opposite effect? Were you once a fan and this is a boomerang effect? Which latitude did you fall into? Remember, there's the latitude of acceptance, of rejection, and of non-commitment. So again, the rubric is going to be worth 100 points altogether. Your intro and conclusion is going to be worth 20 points. Your analysis is going to be worth 60 points. So that's going to be where the bulk is. All right? And the writing quality is going to be worth 20 points, but that will affect everything else. So make sure you have good writing quality. Again, Times New Roman 12-point font. So what did we talk about? We talked about some of the logistics. We talked about different rhetorical criticisms, considerations, things to include, and the rubric. So that's going to be the first of 3 mini lectures today. If you have any questions, please reach out.